intro?
Yeah, sure.
Wait.
Ooh, this one. Yeah, this one's moving here. I'm holding this one.
Okay.
Hello. I'm Vander Gack. I am with VPC, and this is the Creative Features in Vermont panel. And we have lots of wonderful guests, and we're going to talk about all sorts of great things from the pre-production all the way through distribution process. And, you know, if we ever reach any point where you feel like it would be pertinent to shout out a question, we're building kind of a community of understanding here. So I feel like everybody who's in this audience is interested in some way about that. So like, please feel welcome to raise your hand. We can get a mic over to you, or you can just scream. And with that, we've got a pretty short time frame here. So we're gonna move right into introductions, and then we're gonna start talking about pre-production.
Okay. Well, I'm Nora Jacobson, and I've been a filmmaker my whole adult life. And I live in Norwich, Vermont. I moved back to Vermont, which was my home state, in 1995 to make some films. I had lived in the New York metropolitan area before that, and before that I'd gone to school in Chicago and lived various places. But I've been back in Vermont since then, making both documentaries and narrative feature films. Is that enough?
But perfect.
I'm Emma Schlenoff. I live in Bellows Falls, born and raised in Bellows Falls. I got my start actually working when I was 14 years old. I auditioned for Nora's film, Nothing Like Dreaming, and stayed in touch over the years, and we ended up I worked on many of Nora's projects, and more recently produced a feature called The Obelisk, which my good friend Alexi wrote and stars in, and we shot in November of 23 that was principal for about a month, and then we have just finished and had our first screenings in January. Yeah.
My name is Alexi Hartley-Boucher. I grew up in Burlington, Vermont. I spent a lot of time down in the Bellows Falls area, which is where I met Emma. Been doing films in Austria and in Vermont, and wrote and played a small part in The Obelisk.
I'm Lucas Huffman, and I was born and raised here in Montpelier, and then spent many years on the West Coast, and then 15 years also in the New York metropolitan area, where I went to film school, and then just started working in the kind of independent production world down there. And 3 years ago, moved back up here to Montpelier and have been really digging into making work here in Vermont. Documentary, narrative, and then I also am a creative director at an ad agency in Burlington, so I'm getting a feel for the commercial side of filmmaking that happens here in Vermont. And also one of the co-founders of the Vermont Production Collective, with Chad in the back of the room there, and which is the group that also put this talk on.
Fantastic. Moves right down the line. You got your, you know, we can, and if you want to fight over it yourselves too, by all means. So yeah, you know, we've got a little bit of some history there, but you know, pre-production, I feel like the two kind of areas we would look at is, you know, the inception point of an idea versus like assembling a team. And so, you know, talk about your favorite parts of the beginning of pre-production. What's the pre-production look like for whoever feels the most moved to start?
I've got the mic in my hand, so I'm gonna just go. I'm actually in development right now for another feature with a Vermont filmmaker, Brian Santiago, who lives and works out of Chester, Vermont. And he wrote and directed a short version of Grafton, which did really well in the festival circuit, but it was always intended to be a feature. So he and I met at the what was it called? The creative convening thing that happened through the Vermont Arts Council in Bellows Falls last summer, and hit it off, and have been working for the last couple months. We went to the American Film Market together with it, and are shopping it around, and we ended up meeting two folks at AFM that were interested in coming on as EPs, executive producers. And we're really in that kind of dreaming phase of like, if we had this budget, who would we cast? And, what kind of, where do we want to take this in the marketplace? And now that we're working with these two other people, that conversation is shifting a little bit. So it's an interesting phase to be in, and trying to find money, which is probably the biggest hurdle of this stage. And I believe it will be successful in the marketplace. It's a good genre. It's a supernatural thriller. But it's really about finding the right people that want to come on board to make this with us. And I'm still learning. I think we're always still learning, but this part of the project is really new to me. With the obelisk, I came on. We already had some funding, and so I didn't have to do so much in that regard until, as these things happen, we lost the funding, and then decided to shoot a proof of concept. And then with that proof of concept, I started realizing that I needed those skills. So I was looking for resources, and I actually reached out to Stowe Story Labs, who has been an amazing resource for me. If you need some resources for producing, I would suggest reaching out to them. And they hooked me up with a mentor who has been great for me and guiding me through these phases. And yeah, that's where I'm at with both of the films that I've been working on.
Well, for me, the part that I love the most is research and writing. That's in terms of early development. I don't enjoy the fundraising process very much. I have to say that writing grants is very useful and very helpful, and I don't mind. I like to write, and so writing grant proposals, even though at first it seems daunting, once I start doing it, I realize that it's possible. I mean, sometimes the grant applications that I'm working on a grant proposal now for the Points North Fellowship, which is actually a really interesting. Does anyone know what that is, Points North? It's part of the Camden Film Festival, and they created a fellowship where you can go and pitch your project. It's a documentary film festival, so it is for documentaries. And you go there for a week or two, I think a week before the festival, and then a week during the festival, and they pay for all your expenses, and I think they give you a stipend, possibly, and you get to pitch your project and meet all sorts of people. So I'm applying for that now, and the questions that they ask are some of them are just questions that I've never been faced with before. Like the most recent one was production accountability, and has nothing to do with the accounts. It has to do with who, as a filmmaker, are you accountable to? Are you accountable to your audience, to your crew possibly, to actors? Like, what is the content of your film, and how might it affect the people that you work with? So could it possibly traumatize them? Are there trigger points? It's like asking the filmmaker to be responsible for the product, for what they create. emotionally and in every other way. So it's a really interesting question. So I've kind of been enjoying answering that and thinking back all the films that I've worked on and how I've dealt with that issue, and I have in many different ways. So I do enjoy that. I love writing scripts, and I had to put some scripts on hold because I just don't have time right now. I'm directing a play also, so that takes up a lot of my time. Getting ready to go shoot a documentary with my friend Orly, sitting in the front row in Israel very soon. And so, just getting the equipment ready and all of that takes a lot of time. That's fun. Pre-production can be really exciting, but the money raising is not that much fun for me.
Yeah, I mean, to the question, what is the most exciting or like most enjoyable part about like proto pre-production, like early stages? My role, tends to be that of the writer and director on a team, and I absolutely love creating decks. I think it's like just kind of like currency in the pitch world. You have a script. I do love writing scripts too, and especially narrative scripts where you're in like a super free imaginative space. However, I would not really call that pre-production. That's just like in my, like, you're writing and writing and writing. But when the wheels start hitting the road, it tends to be producers. I mean, now it just comes like once I feel like a script is like pretty well baked enough to start sharing with like any potential collaborators. I now just as a practice, as like some sort of like muscle memory practice, we'll start building out a deck. And I guess just for my personality, you guys familiar with like pitch decks? Yeah. This is how I do it. I mean, I'll spend 2 to 3 to 4 days just pulling like reference images. And I feel like this is at a point when in the project when the visual language like really starts like developing, which is always exciting for me. And so you're pulling reference images that are like wide shots, medium shots, close shots, and you like my thinking starts. You force yourself to start being like, okay, say we had a camera in hand, how do we start like shooting this movie and turning the paper language into a visual language? And it's like a really like yes and period before the fundraising, and then when the creative decisions are more based on like limitations of whatever the production is. But anyways, I would say decks are kind of like a real gem in the like pre-pro process.
Building off of that, I actually think also, obviously, writing Vermont is a beautiful place to write in and write about. There's a lot going on here. But I think, pitching your ideas and getting the right people on board. Vermont's a pretty unique place that has a lot of creative people, like out in the middle of the woods. So you can be from New York or wherever, but there's actually like a huge concentration of really talented, creative people here. And in any project, like just slowly starting to talk to people and gaining that momentum, that's a pretty incredible feeling. So that's definitely my favorite aspect of the pre-production, and something that I think Vermont is like uniquely suited to because of all the creative types that are here.
Excellent, everyone. Now we are going to move on to talking about everyone's least favorite part of pre-production, money. What are, for each of you, the most creative one or your favorite, most memorable funding solution that you've either personally or achieved or at least seen firsthand or secondhand. I don't know. Anecdotally is fine if it's a good anecdote.
I gotta think about it. It's paying for stuff yourself, unfortunately. Does anyone have a?
I was gonna say asking him to pay for it. So I feel like with the obelisk we were really lucky to be with a group of people who cared so much about investing in this that they were willing to put their own money into it, and even knowing that, I don't know what the actual number is, but it's probably like higher than 95% of indie films are never going to see a return. And knowing that maybe isn't always the goal when in making something, to see a profit or even a return. And I don't know if I have any good anecdotes other than to say that we haven't been successful in my team so far in grant fundraising. I know that Nora's been really successful in that. So it's interesting to see how films do get made, and our films were all private equity, which comes with its own challenges and expectations from investors, and but I don't think I have any like great tidbits unless someone has a question that I could more specifically answer, but I'll pass it along.
So it is much easier to get grants if you're making a documentary. In fact, it's almost impossible to get grants if you're making a narrative feature film. No, I mean, I don't know if that's actually true because I haven't tried that hard. There are organizations and funding organizations that do give grants to narrative feature films, but generally it is for documentaries that people apply for nonprofit funding because they're usually issue-oriented, and nonprofit organizations usually have issues. They don't just want to give money to film. There are a couple, like the Left Foundation, which gives money to any kind of project. I don't think it's limited to documentaries. Creative Capital is another one that will do both. But many of these those are very, very competitive because they're nationwide and they're very highly coveted. But you have more luck going to a statewide Arts Council, Humanities Council, although they give very little, but to family foundations, like the Vermont Community Foundation has a bunch of family foundations, and sometimes it's possible to get grants from these family foundations, especially if you know someone at those foundations. I do have a little story, and that is that when I made my first narrative feature film, a film called My Mother's Early Lovers, quite a while ago, we did private equity. I had two wonderful executive producers, and we went around and had tea with very wealthy people and were able to raise a certain amount of money, private investments. And, we had to create this huge document, a private placement memorandum, and all this paperwork, which actually you don't necessarily have to do anymore. But then you did. They didn't have online investing. So, but we ran out of money. I don't know if it was probably towards the end of the shoot. And my executive producers didn't want to go back to the same people and ask for more investments. So we actually created a nonprofit company, a nonprofit organization that would collect charitable contributions, and we were able to mix the two. Now, you can't always do that. I mean, you should probably talk to a lawyer before you do that. There are ways to do it, but you can mix nonprofit and for-profit funds if you do it properly.
Is that like a fiscal sponsorship it became more like?
Upper Valley Arts did become a fiscal sponsorship. That Upper Valley Arts is the organization that we created to become like a pass-through to wealthy donors who wanted to get a tax break on their donation. And actually, most of the wealthy people, I would say in Vermont, would prefer to do that than to invest, because as Emma said, it's very, very difficult to raise money. I mean, to make money on independent films, but at least with nonprofit contributions, you get a tax break. So you're doing something good, you're doing something for the benefit of a cause you believe in and someone you believe in, and you also get a tax break. So.
Can I ask a question for Nora just on that? Because it seems, running out of money in the middle of a shoot seems like a nightmare to me. So just a specifics question. So what, did you guys have to like stop shooting and then you all get it together and you're like, let's create a nonprofit? Isn't that like a time-consuming task unto itself? And then you resume shooting? Just
Well,
what happened?
well, we got through, I don't know, our shoot was maybe, we got through the initial shoot, which was like 30 days. We had to take a break anyway because we needed foliage, we needed fall. And so we knew that by the time we got to fall that we were really low on funds. And so we did we shot, I think, in March, April, and then again in October. So we had that time period to create this nonprofit organization, and we got the approval, and we're able to start raising nonprofit funds. So it wasn't like in the middle of the shoot, suddenly it was like, how are we going to pay our bills? Which some filmmakers absolutely do. I think Jay Craven is one who often will run out of money in the middle of a shoot and then, like race around trying to raise money and direct. So it's not fun.
The movie that we did had over 50 locations, and that's oftentimes one of the most expensive aspects of a film. Shooting in like New York and stuff, some of the team and we shot a short film in New York City, and we were literally spending like $10,000 a day for a short film for these like nice locations in the city. That's another thing that's like really great about Vermont, is that people want to help you. So you have these amazing locations that people are like excited to be a part of a movie and help you with, and you just have to ask and be nice and not trash the location, and that goes a long way to stretching your budget on any film. And yeah, I think again, Vermont's a great place for doing this kind of stuff. So yeah.
Well, we shot a film in New York and Vermont, and with Emma actually, the Hanji Box, and we definitely didn't spend. What did you say? 10,000 a day. Yeah, no. So first of all, so it's much easier than you would think to get permission from the New York film and TV department, because they want people to come and shoot there. So for example, we were in the process of getting approval to shoot in Central Park. I don't think they wanted money from us. We shot in we shot in a Korean spa. I think we paid them a little bit of money. In Queens, we shot on the streets of Queens. We shot in New Jersey at someone's, home studio, and we paid them a little bit of money. But actually, I'm not discouraging you from shooting in Vermont, in New York at all. I think it's great if you can, but you can't. I mean, sometimes you do need a city. So I would say that there are definitely ways around spending lots and lots of money in New York.
I would say though that it takes an extra bit of work to make those relationships, and in that case, this was a very specific community that we were entering, the Korean community in New York, which I don't know what the New York Korean film scene was like, but it didn't seem like there were a lot of people asking to shoot in those locations at that point in time. I don't remember anyone saying, "Oh, anyone's shot here before." So
Yeah, but
I think
it still was through the New York Department of Film and TV.
Yeah.
Still.
I want to make sure we give Lucas space to answer for potentially on creative fundraising solutions, and then you've started me off on my next question here, so I'm very excited.
Yeah. I had just one. It was kind of more of like a psychological antidote, which is in, I don't know, sometime in the past couple years, as you know, writing and directing inevitably in this like field of filmmaking, you know, also leads to some like participation in the fundraising. Is there was never like an aha moment in this, but somehow after, you know, making lots and lots and lots of films, for various different reasons, and having, you know, infinite number of like fundraising journeys that go involved. Before I now get into the project, I'm like, can I get so deeply passionate about this project that when I go to talk about it, that I just have like a blind like hope and like you know, like exude some sort of like energy about it that's honest, that those tend to help the fundraising conversations, you know. And it is like, you know, the pros and cons of independent filmmaking. On one hand, it's potentially unhealthy to be like blindly passionate and optimistic about something, and on the other hand, it's kind of necessary. And you know, that will go through the billion of decisions you need to make when you're making a film. But I found specifically like in the fundraising thing, I was like, oh, I'll talk to anybody who will listen to me about this project, and that has, you know, some kind of like pitch power to it, if that makes sense.
Amazing. Also, Vermont Production Collective, you know, we're at things servicing filmmakers in the state, and one of those things means that we can eventually build a resource pool big enough that we don't actually need access to capital. We can just pool our resources and share them effectively. Shout out to the death of modernity. So we've touched a little bit on specific challenges that you encountered on Obelisk, and then also, if you know, because you can't answer that one. Because you can't answer questions about what challenge they had encountered. If you wanted to share, what's a big challenge that you've encountered? We've moved into the production section, everyone. We're talking about production now. And so, yeah, what were some of your biggest challenges you've faced in your current production you've just kind of finished here? And then, Nora, same question, but not about the Obelisk.
As the producer, does anything come to mind?
I'd like to think about it.
Okay. Well, mine come right to the surface. I can remember them absolutely. So when we were shooting the Hanji box, I think it was 4 days before we were to all go to New York, and you know, move into this house that we had rented and shoot. The DP called me and said, Nora, I regret to say that my wife's mother just died, and I will not be able to join you for the shoot.
Not about that. Blocked it out.
Oh, and so what were we to do? You know, we had locked all the locations, all the actors, and it was indefinite. It wasn't like he said, oh, well, in a month, you know, I'll be able to join you. It was like join you for tea or something. It was, we didn't know that. So it was open-ended. And let's see, we had, our gaffer was a shooter, Andy Reichsman. And I knew he was a shooter for documentaries. And rather than go around and try to find another DP in New York, which I could have done, and I actually have some DP friends who perhaps could have done it, but I decided to go with Andy because he was coming on the shoot anyway. So I called him and said, could you bring your camera when you come, you know, on the shoot? And how do you feel about shooting? And so he did, and that's what he did. And it ended up well. Now, there's one other little thing that happened, which was we were settled, I guess, in our apartment and getting ready. And the woman who ran the main space where we were going to shoot, this gallery in New York, in New York, outside of New York. No, it was in New Jersey, sorry. But in the Korean section of New Jersey, stopped returning phone calls. I'd sent her a location permit to sign, and she stopped answering any emails or phone calls. And this was, like 3 days before the shoot. So it happened around the same time. And so we didn't know what to do. And we just showed up there the day before. And she was vacuuming the floor, getting ready for the shoot, but she hadn't bothered to write to us to confirm. And I found out, and it worked out beautifully, but I found out that by giving her this location permit that was very all in legalese, and that as a Korean person, she felt, I found this out subsequently, that it felt hostile to give her this legal document, which should have been, a handshake thing, and instead, so that was a cultural issue that we hadn't been aware of. So those were two things.
And a great through line with your cultural accountability earlier.
Yeah, that's right.
I think one of the most important things for production is catering. It's totally overlooked, but you're feeding your troops. You need to keep the morale high. Having good food on set is, I think, the most important thing. Because if people are having food that's terrible, they're going to be disgruntled. They're not going to have a good time. And it really, that's one of the few times where you're not working. Everyone gets to take a load off, think about things, relax. And if that sort of team atmosphere, if that's miserable, then you're shooting something for 45 days. I mean, they're gonna eat you alive, literally. So I think that's something over the years that I think I've found really helps. We got really lucky with the Obelisk. We had some really, really good French chefs that happened to jump on board, which was amazing. And then the other thing I think also is really undervalued is having a really good organized assistant director or sort of organizational capacity, somebody, a go-between between the artistic side and the production side, someone with good communication skills and who's really behind the project. Because that's sort of the link between everything. So if you don't find a good person in that position, I think that makes things pretty difficult.
I've said this many times before, Sean, I'm so sorry that you have to hear this. This is a narrative production challenge is the question, and it just comes to the top. Nothing even comes close, so I'm just going to say it again. Because I see some new faces in the room. It was casting for me for the last film I did, and we had a pretty large cast. And the lack of a focused just casting network in Vermont. This is a problems with narrative filmmaking in Vermont answer. And it all worked out, and there was a lot of effort, but it kind of becomes more just a street casting sort of process in that. I was reaching out to ended up just being local theater groups, a lot of them across all of Vermont, and so then it wasn't really an issue of there being great acting talent, because we got a lot of great actors, and the performances ended up being really wonderful, and but it really was just a casting process challenge that was challenging and was overcame.
I think one of the biggest challenges for the Obelisk was And I think this is common in indie production in Vermont, is the amount of hats you end up wearing. So in a typical production, there might be, a whole production staff that is a production manager, a producer, associate producers, co-producers, all the way down the line to PAs. And with the Obelisk, it was myself, and I have 2 little kids. And so for me, one of the big challenges was, how do I manage this feature-length production while having almost no childcare, and wearing all of these hats all the way down to a PA? Like I'm setting up the crafty table as I'm managing all the 45, 50 locations and getting all of those things signed. And so for me, it was really the biggest challenge, which producing is that's what it is. It's problem solving. You're just constantly problem solving. And if that's not a good place for you to be in, I don't recommend producing, because that's the whole job. But I think the challenge within that for me personally was how to organize myself enough to take on all of those jobs that I would have in a Hollywood or bigger production town had many hands to do the job. How do I do them myself? So stay healthy. How do I stay healthy? And how do I sleep was I think the biggest challenge for me. But back to the catering thing, like, talk about problem solving. We actually we had a caterer in place, and the first morning of the shoot, that person didn't work out. So within 7 hours, I found, with just luck, found these 2 women who were willing to come on that night and stay with us for 30 days, cooking us 3 meals a day, delivering it to very remote locations. And they rocked it. So it's
floods too is why they were able to do it.
Right. They were working at a restaurant that had been flooded, and so they were out of work. So it worked for them. Yeah.
That's an excellent segue into my next question. So how does the physical and cultural landscape of Vermont shape the production process?
I'll let you answer that, since the kind of idea was really shaped the space.
People and the places. It's remote.
Yeah.
French cooks around.
Yeah, I mean that's like our team was like multinational, and like from some people were from New York, but we had like this strong Vermont core, including the caterers, and that was great. Also, like all the locations were in and around Vermont, and when you just have those connections, you're not someone from like a foreign place, just like, hey, let us use your house. And there's an actual connection, like people went to school together, people like know the town, the drive. So that's, I mean, having that in is just such a invaluable thing. But then also maybe with like the twinkle of like, oh, our director's French, and like, yeah, that's super cool. Like, who doesn't want to? That's like a nice story to have for whoever you're working with. And yeah, in terms of like just stories, I don't know. There's just so many stories here. When I moved to Bellows Falls, I don't know. You can move to the tiniest part of the world. The problems of the world will trickle down to you. So the stories that are happening in these like remote areas, it's the world's problems too. You read the paper in Bellows Falls. Those are international stories that are happening on a small scale. So that doesn't really, like a James Bond spy film, Bells Falls, Vermont. It's not that far apart.
Fuck, dude. I think there's like kind of two levels to that, and one is, you know, from like the creative inspiration standpoint, and I feel like this is probably going to be like unique to all of ours perspectives, just as creative people. And from my perspective, I do, yeah. I mean, I agree that in small rural places, just yeah, like large global relationships and drama and tension can all be seen there. I personally, though, also find just Vermonters to be like such inspiring and unique individuals that don't really exist elsewhere. And so in the scripts I've been writing, you know, about Vermont, it has been like really just kind of thinking about people that I know and just like the special ways in which Vermonters are kind of, it's like a New England stubbornness mixed with also like a real big heart. So there's a kind of unique mix there. And then as well, and this is just something I'm fascinated with. It could be, I mean, I had just moved back here 3 years ago, and have now seen, you know, like 3 years of seasons pass. And in the narrative project I just released and a script I'm developing now, like the seasons are characters, and I just find there's like something that's, you know, it's not dialogue and it's not character, but there's just something that's like poetically understood in seeing changing of seasons that is also like a unique experience to the Northeast. And then when it comes to more like practical stuff, and say assembling crew, there is a ton of creative people, and I feel like Vermont is like a great community of creative people that also like don't have like a ton of egos, you know, and people seem to be like really into being like, oh, well, that's a great idea, like how can I help, you know, which is definitely different than working in other markets. And one other thing that I think, you know, as like maybe narrative filmmaking is going to have a big explosion here in Vermont, but as of now, it seems like there's a lot more documentary films being made than narratives. So when you do have a narrative project, I found, you know, like some DPs are like, whoa, awesome, like let's get that going. So it's been a nice place to be developing narrative films.
Well, in terms of locations, certainly I use my friends and family's knowledge of locations all the time, not just Vermont, but also New Hampshire, because I happen to live right between, like in Vermont, but on the Connecticut River separating New Hampshire. And there are a lot of great locations in New Hampshire too. And so for the film Nothing Like Dreaming that Emma was in as a 13-year-old, we shot in Montpelier. You know, we really mined Montpelier, and then we really mined some of the industrial places in New Hampshire. So that was great, you know, because they're very picturesque and interesting. Right now, I mean, I spent like a bunch of years making a film about Vermont called Freedom and Unity, the Vermont movie, which Emma helped get out. And so we shot all over Vermont for that film, not just me. It was a collaborative project. And so I don't know if we were in every part of Vermont, but that's, in a way, I feel like I've done that in a way. Like right now, I'm working on a screenplay that takes place in Ontario, Canada, and I am working on a screenplay that takes place in Chittenden, Vermont, and New York City. But it's not like I'm enamored in love with shooting in Vermont right now. It happens because I live here, but it's not like I'm seeking out projects to shoot here. I mean, I don't know if was that your question, really?
That's a solid answer to my question. My next question here is, I'm going to try to stop that from feedbacking. Everyone's pretty well traveled. What are some things that we could be bringing to Vermont from other countries or other cities? How could we be shifting production in the state?
So I joined the VPC board, I think about 1.5 years ago. And I originally connected with Chad and Lucas because I was looking for an AC, and they had it was during the pandemic, and they had just launched VPC. I'd found it on Instagram. And I was drawn to join the board because of this idea of being able to network between people. As you said, and you have said that there's all of these creative people, but you ask someone, who do you know that's a camera person? But what really drew me to VPC was this idea of a database or a network that we could, you need a camera person, you type in, I need a camera person, and it comes up. And we've actually just launched in the last couple months a prototype database to do just that. It's called filminvermont.com. And I think it's an incredibly valuable resource that we've been lacking and is essential for being able to make things here. So one, shout out to Brian for developing that. And what do we need more of? Let's see. I don't think something like a big studio would be economically, I don't think they would have enough work here, or the environment is really suitable for any kind of big major productions. But I think more post houses could be useful in post studios could be a useful resource, which I think would cost a lot of money. And so any big investor who wants to do something like that, I would support you.
Any big investors in the audience?
Man, something we need more of is sound mixers. But that's like a chicken and an egg. So then you would be like, well, how's the sound mixer that I need, in a month from now, going to be working between now and those days? And it's like, well, then I suppose we just need more people making movies here. So that's a deep question, Vander. But there's no, I have no solve, but I was thinking, because you're like, oh, well, how does this compare to, say, working in other markets? And, and say working in the New York City market, there's just so much stuff being produced all the time. And there's a machine that's in crews are just going out. I guess actually right, not this second, but in general, there's this massive just production industry that's always churning. And then so when it comes to certain crew members, there's inevitably you're like, oh, our sound mixer couldn't do it tomorrow, what are we going to do? And then there might be 3 other sound mixers that are all super high qualified and are ready to go. And so I don't really have a great answer for that.
That's solid.
I would second that about the sound mixers. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple in New Hampshire, or at least 1 or 2, I guess. One of the problems is that you can't make a living being just a sound mixer. like someone that I like a lot, who he has a landscaping business, but so he's quite limited, and he has a child, and so yeah, that's a problem in terms of so I think it's the amount of production occurring here. Now maybe that's going to change and will increase. The other thing is color people, color correction people, color graders, and post-production houses. I think there are a couple in Burlington. Is that correct? Probably?
Oh, yeah.
A couple. Yeah, I don't think there are in any other part of Vermont that I know of, actually. So it's not such a terrible problem because you can easily, drive 2 hours to get to Burlington from, southern Vermont. But it does present problems. I think the other thing is like ADs or people who know how to do film budgets, for example. Yeah, line producers. Now, you can use Excel. There is a learning curve, though, to know how to do a proper narrative film budget. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are people in the collaborative that there are line producers listed. I don't know. Are there?
Not a ton, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
And equipment rental, too.
Equipment rental? Yes, I think so. Although a lot of people own their own equipment now. I mean, there is, I'm sure you're right about equipment. The other thing I was going to say was to second that someone brought up about some kind of central casting organization where all the actors in Vermont could submit their resumes and reels. Now, maybe that's something that you could create in the co-op.
It's part, yeah.
It is part of it already?
Part of the intention.
The intention. Yeah. Okay.
Everyone in this audience should sign up for the database. I am sure that there is something that you could bring to a film that would help make it happen. We've seen how happenstance can play.
Getting into position to deliver the microphone for audience.
Awesome.
I'm here to help.
We have someone ready to hand out audience, and that basically moved us out of the production line of questions that I had. So questions from the audience. Oh, sorry, I should have pointed.
I guess maybe a lot of it's covered by the questions with the database and stuff. But since you guys have all produced films, how have you generally come to meet your collaborators? Is it at events like festivals? Is it mostly online? Is it just past experience? Because I know we struggle to find people now, but since you guys have all succeeded in the past, what was your personal journey with meeting people that you've had these successful collaborations with?
Go first, I guess, since I've got the mic in my hand. Personally, it's just been, just talking to people, meeting people. You meet one person, they're like, oh, I think I know this person. That person doesn't work out, then you go to the next person. And just from one project to the next and things like this. I don't know, you just sort of meet people at the bar and like, oh, I know, and it just sort of slowly happens. And then, once you work with somebody, you want to work with them again often. That's been my experience, at least. Just the old-fashioned way, I guess.
Yep, lots of chatting. I am not a big social media fan. The coolest thing I find about social media, Instagram, etc., is that literally I'll see, you start following, say, people whose work you like, and then especially, like directors of photography, other directors, I just straight up reach out to them and be like, hey, I love what you did here. Here's my work. Let's chat, and it's not even with anything specific in mind. It's also maybe just a constant practice too, just constantly connecting all the time. And it's something I really enjoy. You get to talk to someone, say you see a film, and I just set up phone calls, and then I just geek out, and I'm like, what were you guys doing there? Blah blah blah, this and that. And it's like literally like the only thing I personally am excited about when it comes to social media. But it's like been super effective when filmmaking is such a collaborative process and like just expanding, you know, like a group of collaborators.
I think it's a really good question. It's such an important factor in the success because it is so collaborative to make things together, and that can go really poorly if you're clashing with your collaborators. And just before the obelisk, I had a 3-year-old and a newborn baby, and Alexi, it was during the pandemic, and Alexi said, he and I had been friends beforehand, and he said, I'm moving back to Vermont, and I'm writing this thing, and I know you're pregnant, but when it's done, I want to get you involved somehow. And that's what happened. The baby was born, and it was still the pandemic, and there was a bonfire outside, and he said, I finished writing the thing, and I had the baby in the thing, we were bouncing around, and I said, all right, let's meet up and pitch me the project. And because he and I had this bond together, that was our way of connecting creatively. But beyond that, we had to learn if we could work together. And that's been quite the journey. And luckily, we've been really successful. But that's not always the case. So choosing your collaborators is an enormous factor in the success of the project. So do it wisely, and I would say know when to walk away and to part ways before you destroy a relationship, because sometimes a friendship is more important than the work that could potentially go horribly wrong if you end up working together. And luckily, Nora has been an incredible resource and mentor for me through my entire, like from childhood up till now. I feel so lucky to have worked with Nora and learned from Nora and been guided by Nora. And so it's an honor to sit next to her on this panel.
Well, I was going to say thank you, Emma. It's always wonderful to work with you. I wish I worked with you more, frankly. But you're busy producing your own films now, so I have to find other people. That's actually the hardest thing for me. I am so used to being working solo, and I'm not particularly social. I don't love talking on the phone. In fact, I hate talking on the phone. I'm shy. I don't really like to meet people at film festivals. I mean, I will go to a film festival if I have someone with me, but I mean, I've been to plenty without anyone, and it's really tough, especially at Sundance or places like that. So I do encourage you to have a buddy, like someone that you can go with, even if you have to pay their way and it's your sister or brother, really, to have someone that you can rely on. I have had some bad experiences, and I always try to make them work out. And I've had people that I'm glad finally walked away, because I'm very dogged. I will try to make it work. But you're right, it's not always a good idea. So that's just one of the challenges for me, I think. I'm not the kind of schmoozer person that is really helpful to be if you're a producer.
Have a loud voice. Yeah, okay. This is not going to work.
Oh no! I was hoping it would.
No, look at your chair.
It's
Look
just
at
on
your
the chair.
It's. I was going to ask another question, but it's sort of half been answered already, so I won't repeat it. But this whole notion of how you find people to work with you, whether it's cast or whether it's crew, I mean, there's different ways of doing it. I want to repeat and stress that the new database by the Vermont Production Collective, it is new, so there's not much in it. But one way to get to know who's doing what and how to get in touch with them and what have they done before, is to make sure that we feed into that database as much as possible. Everybody here, everybody in any capacity, whether you're writing scripts or whether you're a DP or an aspiring DP, that's okay. You just put your name in, even if you haven't got lots of titles behind your belt, because that's the only way people will get to hear about you, and you can write things, and it's very, very important. The hope is also there is another online film database called VAMP, and although that's a database of films that have already been made, but there are a lot of people in there who are still working. Then there's a few who have probably retired, but there's a lot of people in there who are still working. And combining those two, or having them adjacent to each other or linked to each other, could automatically expand the range. Nora said she is hesitant to go to film festivals unless she kind of knows the people or has her sister with her. But I was going to say that another way of meeting people is going to film festival, especially film festivals that showcase locally made films. And there are several. There's, of course, RIF does some of that. This festival does some of that. And the biggest one is the Made Here Film Festival in April. It's a great opportunity because it takes place in a bar. A very, very large bar. It's a great way of, just having a drink with somebody in between screenings, and it's so going to festivals and meeting people, even if you're shy, if the atmosphere is friendly, it's possible, just standing there with a beer or something. But the other thing, as you can hear from my accent, you can hear I'm not a Vermonter. And I came here from London, but I've also lived in other cities. And I was involved in films in England, making films and so on. There's something, this is almost contradicts what I've just said, because I'm trying to encourage people to get to know and to expand and develop the film production in this state. But at the same time, there's a bit of my brain saying, why do we have to just, there's states around us. The world is big. There's New York City, there's New Hampshire, there's Massachusetts, there's Maine almost. Not to mention Quebec, Canada, but that's slightly legally, it's a different issue, and they probably don't want to talk to us at the moment. But anyway, but in London, for example, and I've made many films there using different professionals. There was never a question, we have to find somebody in London because this is our town. If we had a good sound mixer up in Liverpool, there was no problem. You take the train, it's only 2 hours. And I found in Vermont, because I ran the Vermont International Film Festival, VTIF, for 12 years. And the first 2-3 years, I was trying to make contact with other film festivals in the States, thinking we could all collaborate and do mutual programming and so on. And I discovered to my shock that a state that only has, 650,000 people, Brattleboro won't talk to Burlington, and Montpelier won't talk to Middlebury, and everybody is so possessive about their own little area. It's one of the smallest states in the nation, and yet within it there are such divides. So I don't know if the Vermont Production Collective can overcome that. Because really, even from up, Newport down to Bennington or whatever, it's no more than 3 hours, really, is it? And the roads are good. Anyway, sorry.
In other words, go to filminvermont.com and sign up for...
Filminvermont.com. Sign up now.
Film in VT. filminvt.com.
I saw another hand.
I can take the wireless.
Yeah, you
microphone
take that
out.
one
You
now.
guys
I'm not gonna
share
throw
the
this.
wires. Someone else? Go.
Hi, my name is Shane. I had a question about because when you're making movies, I'm a filmmaker too, and have limited resources and stuff, not just money, but the time and energy you're willing to put aside for it. And I guess one question is like, I'm sure you always often have multiple ideas for films floating around in your head, and I guess my question is, are there any key factors, key deciding, factors in terms of like, if you have multiple ideas, choosing what project is the right one to make now, as opposed to later? Like right now, I'm kind of caught between two projects that I really want to make, and I'm not quite sure which one I should move forward with right now. So I'm curious if you have any advice or experience with that sort of thing, and any, again, key factors that would decide to move forward with a certain project or not.
I would say that because film is such a collaborative thing. I mean, if you have two ideas, you love one idea, but your friends love the other. You might have to make that sacrifice, and to get the project made. We all have like projects that we love. With the obelisk, that wasn't even like totally a film. Like the core ideas of the film weren't exactly what I was most interested in, but it's what my friends were really interested in. And I could sort of like, it was a vehicle for me to get some of my other ideas into a project. But it's such a collaborative thing that you got to think also that you're spending, 3-4 years of your life trying to get this thing made. So yeah, one, make sure that you can live with the story that, in 4 years from now, are you still going to be interested in that story? Or could you tell it at the bar in 30 seconds and, have more exposure potentially? And then it's important if you want to get a project made, it's a collaborative thing. So what folks are interested in and yeah.
Yeah, I think that like immediately I was thinking back to what I said too. Like, say you have two ideas and you're really excited about both of them. If you're lucky, maybe there's one that you're that much more excited about. And this is just my perspective on this, because it's really like, what is the idea in the story that just fires you up, just because of the nature of this, is that if you're not fired up about it, it's going to just be a pain in the ass to make, and no one wants that. But then secondly, just kind of just a different way of framing what Alexi said, which is also too, say you've got two and you're like, wow, I really love this, and the pros and cons are 50-50 here, and the pros and cons are 50-50 there. Also, pros and cons list. Do you like do that? Seriously, I have pros and cons list. Oh man, yeah, I pros and cons list every decision, which kind of puts it literally on the paper, and then you're there. And just a reframing of what he said, which is like also like what's achievable. Like maybe the one is like this big project, and you're like, this is going to take 2 years to put together X, Y, and Z. And then there's another one, which is like, yeah, you're ready to go out like tomorrow. And again, it totally depends on the sort of filmmaker you are. So I only speak for myself, but it's like, oh, this like achievable one, like let's go. And I just find that like the collaborative process and it being achievable, just like anywhere you can like save energy is I think that's kind of like another aspect of that.
Or I was just going to, one quick thing. I would say develop both of them, because if you talk to any screenwriter or filmmaker in any, LA or New York, they'll say that they have multiple projects in development. I have 6, which is crazy. But, and you work on the ones that you can at the moment, but don't, keep them both going.
I was going to say that too, that it sounds totally normal to have 2 or more. I was just watching a producer's panel, and the woman had 30 projects in that were all floating around, and like that's not in my wheelhouse. But I was going to say it's a potent mix of your personal capacity and the passion that you must have to follow that project through to the end. And as a producer, when I read a script, what I like, the story is important, of course, but is it practical? So for me, when I'm reading a script, I have to say, can I shoot this here? Because that's what my life requires, is that I have to shoot this here. I have to be here. So it's, again, back to that examining your skill set and your personality and using that passion to inform your decisions.
Hi there. Oh, nice and loud. A couple years ago, I know that there was talk of a Vermont film and media industry task force. I was wondering if any of you had thoughts on that, or any knowledge if that's moved any much forward.
I think Chad is the best person to answer that question, if Chad wants to answer that question.
They did have the task force, and they looked into a variety of different things about the industry in the state. And where to stand with the camera there. And we do have the report on the Vermont Production Collective website. It's quite long, and they looked at incentives and a variety of different things. But it didn't come out. The result of the report was not, these are the actions we need to take. But we have continued. I participated in, was not on the panel, but they talked with me, and we've continued to work with the Arts Council in the ways that they've tried to take the lessons from that forward, and they've been trying to get money from the state to support the work that we're doing in the database creation and just more networking sort of stuff going on and interconnection. I don't know if I answered your question. They did complete the report.
I think as an
Well, the task force, there's a bunch of key questions that always come up. Are there incentives in the state? Is there a film commission? There are different things that sort of come up as key questions. And a lot of it's really hard to make actionable. And so one of the things that it's always been our focus at Vermont Production Collective is to look at where can we actually make a difference. And so our really grassroots focused approach is something that really connected with the Arts Council, and they said, you're actually generating results, as opposed to, okay, let's try to create a commission. There have been multiple commissions in the past. There have been incentives in the past. I've worked in other states where there were incentives, and it's once you get something like that going, you then have to fight for it every year because it's the easiest thing to cut out of the budget. So again, it's like, well, where can we create impact that's beneficial for not only a lot of times it's an idea of luring productions to come film in the state, but we're saying, let's support people who are already here working, and not just the production stage, which is often a very small part of the filming. But people who are working in post-production, how are we helping sound mixers? Maybe we need to connect some more caterers into the database. It seems to be a big theme. But yeah. Sure.
Just to add to that, also, one of the things that I think has been a talking point for VPC when it comes to the state advocacy work is talking about less about something like a film commission and drawing these big productions in, and more talking about the economic workforce benefits that this industry can bring to the state, because it tends to be a younger population, and we have a problem in Vermont of retention of young working professionals. So drawing attention to the people that are staying here and are working here, and how much money comes along with a graphic designer who's working out of Montpelier or something like that, I think has been a big part of our state advocacy work.
Any other questions? I've got the microphone right here.
I've got one, but I can just shout from here. So we have an interesting connection here in terms of the distribution part of that we had a 66 screen tour of one of your films organized by you. Yes. So can we talk a little bit about that? Yes. Summarize a bit.
About distribution in general?
Talking about distribution in general, but you did a screening tour of one of Nora's movies. So that's a distribution method. How did that go? And it was was that all in Vermont?
Yes. So one of the intentions behind the Vermont movie was to make sure that we show it to Vermonters everywhere, not just in the kind of like bigger areas. So we intended to go to all of the counties and show each. So it was a 6-part series. And so there ended up being 66 screenings of each of the parts, and I was just a small part of organizing that. It took everybody involved to get it off the ground. But at each screening we tried to have one of the filmmakers present and one of the I think we called them advisors, right? So that there was an opportunity for a Q&A after. And I think actually this question segues nicely into a lot of the work that Lucas has been up to in his most recent film tour, where he had this beautiful film that he made. And I think, if I remember correctly, you had seen some other films that you felt like resonated with the theme of family and what that means in all of its capacity in Vermont. And so you organized a short tour around the state with your project.
Yeah, that last fall I had put together like a block of shorts, and they were all by Vermont filmmakers. They were all shot in Vermont. They were all, inherently, Sean was in there. Vermont narrative films, made by Vermonters, about Vermonters. And they all had a similar theme, and it was kind of like an exploration in something that I, as a filmmaker, had been interested in, which is like independent distribution. And so I arranged a series of screenings throughout the state, and it was a super fulfilling experience, that's for sure. And something when, like with a short film, there's no like golden ticket really for distribution, I suppose, other than like winning an Oscar, which would be great. So it's kind of like a Wild West landscape about what a successful run for a short film can look like outside of playing festivals, and it was a great experience especially because of the content. Was quite similar. It sounds like to the Vermont movie, which was like I really wanted to make sure that people in Vermont were able to see these films, and lo and behold, the audiences were really engaged.
In terms of, I don't mind, if you don't mind me saying something again. In terms of distribution, when it comes to narrative features, as I've been learning, thinking about distribution from the development stage is hugely important. It's something that we don't like to think about because it's like a lot of work, and often there's not a lot of control within it unless you're going the self-distribution route. You're kind of hoping that the person that you've signed with will do what they say, pay you, follow through with the contract, and hopefully someone will see it. And then within that, the contract is like, it's all negotiable. So as I'm in it right now, recommend that if you're going to make a feature, to start thinking about it as soon as possible and do your homework on who you'd like to work with, and to inform yourself on where you could be. There's a lot of predatory distributors out there. And I've just heard nightmare story after nightmare story of people signing away the rights to their film, and that was that. I never saw a dime. And so I think that there's a shifting landscape in distribution right now, and it is not the same as it was even 5 years ago. So to stay current too within the landscape is important.
Wait, I could add just one more thing to what you're talking about. I'm realizing the tour that I put together in my next project kind of like gave me confidence to its narrative. So I'm kind of taking like impact tours. Have people heard about like an impact tour?
No, explain.
Where it's like kind of like targeted screenings at specific audiences, or like institutions, so you're basically like doing what you guys basically did, an impact tour by taking a Vermont movie and screening it across Vermont, knowing that this what does it mean to be Vermonter theme would resonate for audiences across Vermont, and so say you have some social justice themes in your films, connecting with organizations that are also doing work with those certain themes. But it takes a lot of time and energy to do this, and that in the current budget we're developing, there's like, of the total budget, like 15-20% is dedicated to an impact tour, and that it takes a little bit of the pressure off like the economic success of the film, because if you say then when we go to pitch it to investors, we're not saying, hey, this is like a great investment, because no one in independent film could like make that guarantee that we're going to take your money and we're going to give you back 4 times that amount of money, which is like traditionally an investment. But more saying, hey, this is like what the movie's about. We on the back end, and we've already targeted, like some impact tour producers, and say, do you want to get involved with telling the story? So it's like a different pitch, and it's all about the distribution.
To you.
Well, let's see. I mean, I can talk a lot about distribution, not necessarily specifically about Vermont, although all of my films I have shown in Vermont at various venues. The Vermont movie was the most complete, but I showed them all at many venues throughout Vermont. I've also made lists of the independent cinemas in the United States and try to show my films at those. And many independent theaters, like the Laemmle Theater chain in LA, for example, will show independent films on a dedicated day or so. And so, you contact Greg Laemmle, the grandson of the person who founded Laemmle Cinemas, and, you pitch your project, and he decides if he thinks there's an audience in LA for the film. But that's just one. I mean, there's in Waterville, Maine, there's an amazing cinema that's run by the guy who runs the Maine International Film Festival, which is a wonderful film festival. There's the Savoy Theater. So these are examples of, there's one in, they're in Arizona. So there are a bunch of theaters, and you can easily find that list that will show independent films, and you just contact them. And to my surprise, very often the person who runs that little theater will say yes, and especially if you plan on going, if you can go. And that is something worth putting into your budget, plane fare, so that you can go to New Mexico and show your film, because the theater won't pay for you to go there. So that's a venue. And then, of course, there's the broadcasters like Vermont PBS, the Made Here people, who will show lots of Vermont content, as you probably know. I don't have much. I haven't had any experience actually with streamers outside the PBS system. Hulu or Netflix. It's very hard to get to them. So I don't have experience with them. Maybe one of you does. But the PBS system has a couple of distribution arms that are for independent filmmakers. And it's easy to, find what those are. And one is NIDA, one is American, I can't remember the name. Anyway, there are a couple, not just POV or the big ones, but there are a couple of other ones as well. So it's not all for naught. Does anyone have experience with like the Netflix, the streamers?
So I went to the American Film Market this year, and unless you have an in to those places or you're, a Sundance darling, they're not answering my emails, unfortunately. But the type of distributors, I feel like at my level, that are very accessible. You contact them, you send them your screener, they decide whether they like your film or not, and they make you an offer. What they can do with your film after that is a wide range of possibilities. So I think this idea of self-distribution or hybrid distribution is really on the rise in indie filmmaking, and is an interesting option these days, because even if you do go with a distributor and you have the option to, the marketing, for example, is often one of the main things that's negotiable. If you want to be successful, your film to be successful, you're going to have to put a lot of work into the marketing part of it, even if you do sign with a distributor. So maybe it's more worthwhile to contact all these theaters. And another one I want to shout out is the Bellows Falls Opera House has just launched this awesome initiative called Rockingham Entertainment Development. And they are doing this great program where they want you to show your film, and they will front the cost of the rental, which is unheard of in trying to get your film shown at a theater, and because they want to support filmmakers, and they saw this hole in the industry that was all these filmmakers were trying to show their films, but they couldn't pay the fee to show in the theater. So I highly recommend, if you have a film, to contact the Bellows Falls Opera House. Yeah.
But usually, like a place like the Savoy doesn't ask for money up front. There's a split between the filmmaker and the theater. That's what I've found.
You have anything to say?
I think, unless anyone else has last final question, I think we are at our time here. So thank you, everyone. Oh, here we go.
I just want to plug something.
Plug something.
That I feel like is related. At Spiral House in downtown Burlington, we've started having Vermont-based film night every Thursday, and I want to talk to all of you, but we've been showing Vermont-made films from the past few years every Thursday. So that would be another good venue to come see some good Vermont-based films.
That's Spiral House
It's called Spiral House.
in
yeah.
Burlington. Great. Thank you. Awesome.
Nice.
Oh, and come to Mothership Monthly Film Fest, which happens at the same place first Saturday of every month.
Yeah.
And that's a
Festival, yeah.
that's a networking event. Is that right?
No, it's a theme-based monthly film festival where you have a month to make a.
And introduce yourself too.
Hi, I'm Dylan Tanner. We had a block yesterday, but Mothership is a monthly-based film festival where you have a theme and you have a month to make a movie. And at the end of the month, first Saturday of every month, we screen all of these films together in competition, and the audience votes on a winner. And then the winner chooses the theme for the next month, and it goes on for eternity.
It's a great event. I see that. Downtown Burlington.
But just also, this will let people go to make other films, but if you would like to come up, we're all about connecting. Come say hi. This is not formal. Say hello to the filmmakers. And thank you all for coming out.
Thanks
Thank you
for having us.
Thank